Hey everyone, so in this section we're doing something a little bit different than some of the previous segments that we've done in the past. We're actually going to be talking about Elon Musk's educational background. Now this is going to be particularly interesting for those of you who happen to be big fans of Elon Musk, but also for those of you who just want a little bit more information about him, but in particular about some of his experiences at the university level. Now we're going to be starting off with the institution where he began his university studies, which is at Queen's University, which is based in Canada. Now for those of you who aren't familiar with Queen's University, it's located in Kingston, Ontario, which is in between Toronto, Ontario, and Ottawa, Ontario, which is the nation's capital. Queen's University is often regarded as one of the most prestigious universities in Canada and actually ranks very strongly across a variety of different disciplines as well. Now, although you might not be able to tell this by looking at some international rankings, domestically within Canada, it is often well regarded as one of the most rigorous institutions in the country. Elon actually spent 2 years here before transferring to the University of Pennsylvania in the United States. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with this institution, it is an Ivy League school, and it is internationally ranked for a variety of different disciplines as well. Elon actually graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with 2 bachelor's degrees, a bachelor's degree in physics and a bachelor's degree in economics. Now, there's a couple of things that we can already extrapolate based off of this. The first is the fact that we can tell that he would have been a very strong student. The fact that he was able to transfer to an Ivy League institution tells us that his undergraduate transcripts would have been very, very strong. In addition to that, the fact that he was able to get into the Wharton School of Business, which is where the economics degree would have come from, tells us that he would have also been an extremely strong student and would have had extremely strong grades in quantitative-based courses, which we could have already assumed given the fact that he is a physics major. If you're not familiar with the Wharton School of Business, it's the business school within the University of Pennsylvania and is often regarded as one of the most, if not the most prestigious business schools in the world. It's often in the same conversations as Harvard Business School, and many people who are very accomplished in the economics and finance field have either come from the Wharton School of Business or are often regarded as being one of the strongest business schools in the world as well. So the fact that he was able to get into these programs and to also thrive in these programs does tell us what he would have been like as a student. Now, following his time at the University of Pennsylvania, he pursued briefly a PhD program at Stanford University in what looks to be applied physics. He also talks about studying energy physics in particular, but actually left the program after 2 days. He talked about the fact that a lot of his studies were very theoretical and it was not necessarily very practical or useful for some of the things that he actually wanted to pursue. Silicon Valley at the time was also booming, and so he thought that there was a lot of opportunities for him to pursue some of his entrepreneurial endeavors through Silicon Valley at the time. So there's a couple of things that we can actually take away from this whole situation. The biggest is the fact that although he wasn't able to actually finish his PhD program, he was able to pursue a lot of his interests in physics, but through his actual entrepreneurial endeavors. Also, although again he didn't finish his PhD program, we can assume that had he stayed at Stanford, he would have been a very strong student given his background up until this point. It looks like he was a very strong student coming out of Queens, and it looked like he graduated as a very strong student coming out of the University of Pennsylvania. We also assume that in addition to his very strong undergraduate transcripts, that he probably had very strong standardized test scores as well, given the fact that he was able to get into Stanford University. And particularly, it looks like his quantitative scores would have been extremely strong given his physics background and his economics background as well. And given that he was an international applicant in that he actually immigrated over to Canada, then perhaps some of the softer liberal arts skills might have been an area that he might not have necessarily been as strong in. But given the fact that he got into Stanford, we can assume that his undergraduate scores in some of the liberal arts based courses, but even his test scores, if he were to have taken the GRE, probably would have been very strong as well. And so we can see that all around the board, not only quantitative based courses, he was probably a very, very strong student. Now, this is really significant because a lot of people assume that a lot of entrepreneurs aren't always the best students. And while that might be the case in a lot of situations, I don't think that that's the case here for Elon Musk. He was a very accomplished student, and I think that had he had stayed in his PhD program, perhaps he would have been working in academia, perhaps he would have eventually transitioned to the private sector. But one thing is for certain, I am pretty certain that he would have been a fairly successful PhD student and a PhD graduate had he had committed himself to the program in the same way that he committed himself to a lot of his entrepreneurial endeavors as well. Another thing that we can extrapolate from this entire sequence is the fact that a lot of his interests and a lot of the things that he's pursuing now have always kind of been with him throughout his entire career. Up until, when he was an undergraduate student, it seems like he always had a very strong interest in some of the engineering disciplines and just figuring out some of the toughest problems, which is something that he is very well known for today as well. And so hopefully this provided you with a little bit more information about Elon Musk's educational background. If you'd like for us to profile anybody else, please leave that in the comment section below. I hope you did appreciate this segment. As always, make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.